In this video, we're going to talk about industry analysis. And why are we going to talk about industry analysis? Well, do you remember this slide from topic 1 from the first video? In this slide, the point I was trying to make is that there are two different types of strategy. And that strategy, at the end of the day, is to bring a rate of profit above the cost of capital. So investors give you money, you bring some money, you put into the business, you want to bring a return on that investment that is actually higher to the money that you initially invested. And there are two different ways of approaching this, two ways of understanding a strategy. The first one is what we call corporate strategy. And corporate strategy is about choosing the industry. Where should I compete? What industry is going to be more beneficial for the kind of product, discovery, technology that I have? And then we have the second one, which is business strategy, which is about how I'm going to gain competitive advantage within the industry I chose. So it's about how am I going to compete in that industry. But first, before you actually decide how you're going to compete, you need to decide in which industry you are going to compete. We'll be talking about business strategy later on when we talk about internal analysis. But today, in this video, we're going to be focusing on corporate strategy. We're going to be focusing on industry analysis, how to analyze industries so we can make the best decision. We can actually choose the industry that is going to bring a bigger return on capital. So in order to talk about industry analysis, we're going to cover 4 different points, okay? So you have them here in this slide. The first one is, what is the connection between industry analysis and environmental analysis? So environmental would be like a bigger group. And within our environment, we have different industries. So the environment is going to affect the industry you choose. That's why it's important to understand this relationship between industries and the wider environment. Then we're going to be talking about how to analyze how attractive an industry is. And we're going to talk about how to apply industry analysis. We're going to talk about specific tools to analyze an industry efficiently. And after that analysis, we're going to talk about the output of that analysis, which is you need to arrive at the key success factors to the industry you are analyzing. So, as I said the first day of class in the first video, we're going to be coming back to this diagram again and again. And the reason why is because I want to make sure that every time we start a new topic, it is very clear how this topic fits into the overall logic of business strategy. So it's very important to understand that all the different sections that we're going to be covering here, they are different pieces of a process, the process of strategy analysis or strategy build. So in this diagram, remember, we were saying that strategy is nothing else but connecting who you are, what you have, your product, connecting that with your industry, with your environment. So it's about finding a good fit between what you have to offer and your environment. And we cover in topic 2 the first element of the firm, of the internal side of things, of your internal, what you actually have. And we talked about goals and values. And today we're going to be talking about the industry environment. How are we supposed to approach the industrial environment? How are we supposed to understand it? And then later on, the next topic will be on resources and capabilities. But just for today, just keep in mind that we are keeping this logic. We're moving through this diagram. So this diagram summarizes the logic of what strategy is basically about. So let me start by giving you a very practical example of why industry analysis is extremely important when you're putting together a good strategy. And especially when you're dealing with new discovered, new products, and when they have applications for many different problems. We were talking about the value before. And the problem with scientific discoveries or any technologies is that a lot of the times those technologies have many different applications. Therefore, their value can be very different. They can have different values depending on the industry you choose. So that's why a lot of the times when you have a discovery like this or a new technology, it's very important that you choose the industry that is actually going to bring about the bigger return on capital, that has the best potential for you to survive, especially if you are starting a new company. One of the things that you need to prove to your investors is that you can create a cash flow quickly enough. That's why choosing an industry is probably the most important aspect that any startup needs to look at. And here we have three examples, okay? Three examples I've worked with in the past. The first one is called Nemertea. And this company, startup company, what they do, they use a toxin that this seaworm actually releases, and they use that toxin to it has different applications. One of them can be for insecticides. And the great thing about this is that you can use it in crops. You can use it in different crops and it would kill different bugs, but it wouldn't affect mammals. So basically this insecticide wouldn't affect human beings. So that means that if you use this as an insecticide, you would be overcoming a major problem that existing insecticides have. But there's another application. There is anti-fouling. Boats underneath, they create this layer of different animals that actually get attached to it, and it's very difficult to clean. So apparently using this toxin would actually allow for boats to actually not accumulate this on around the boat. So you have two completely different industries. So you need to choose, what problem are we going to focus on? Which industry are we going to focus on? And again, you can think the implications of these two. Each of them is going to bring a different return on capital. So understanding the industry, understanding who your competitors are, understanding how much money you can actually charge in that industry, understanding all this is going to allow you to make a better decision. The same thing with the second product here. I mentioned this before in my videos. And this is this material that actually absorbs humidity very well. And it has so many different applications, from TV screens to cosmetics, drug delivery. And for example, if we focus in these two here, cosmetics and drug delivery, which one to choose? So in order to make a decision, because as a startup, you can't go into all the industries at the same time. You need to choose. So good industry analysis will allow you to make a better decision. I have this product, has this solution, where the value that I'm going to add is going to be greater, where customers are going to be willing or have a bigger problem and therefore are going to be more willing to pay back for my solution. The same thing with the last one, graphene. The company I've been working with, Graphimatech, the same thing. They have so many different applications. Thermal pads, heat sinks, for example, like the ones that I have here. But now, the same thing. Which one am I going to choose? Because they all have different industry, different competitors, different prices that you can charge, different problems. So again, for any of these companies, it's extremely important for survival to choose the right industry. The industry that is going to allow you to compete and to gain greater value. So we're saying that it's very important to choose the right industry. And if a strategy is connected to choosing the right industry, and a strategy as well is about identifying and exploiting the sources of profit. So what are my sources of profit in this industry? What if I go into insecticides? What are the ways here, the different ways I have to make profit here? So the first thing that you need to do in order to choose an industry, before you go into one industry or the other, is to really understand what determines the level of profit in an industry. Some industries are going to give you a bigger return on capital. Other industries are going to give you a lower return on capital. So what determines that an industry is more profitable than another? What are the key elements I need to look at so that I can understand or I can get to the conclusion insecticides, excising solution, but the margins, the money I'm going to be making in that industry are minimal. Or when you talk about graphene, which one is going to give you a bigger return? What determines the level of profit that you can gain when you're going to thermal pads, when to heat sinks, when to plastic covers for computers? So you need to understand this, because if you want to choose the right industry and you want to bring return on capital to your investors quickly, especially when you're a startup, you need to be really good at analyzing this and analyzing the level of profit in each industry. We already discussed in topic 2, when we were talking about value, that you're going to create value with your technology, your product, your scientific discovery. You create value if you find customers who are willing to pay for your solution, for your product, for your technology. They're going to pay more than what you're going to spend producing that solution. So obviously, that difference can be small or it can be very big. So your objective when you are choosing industries to find that customer where the margins are bigger. But now, how do we understand, or how do we see, or how do we get a sense of how those margins are going to be bigger? What is going to tell us how big those margins between what you need to put into the process to produce the solution and the money you're going to get back from your customers? How do we identify that? Well, there are 3 key things here that we're going to cover. And we're going to go into a lot of detail around these 3 through this video and the second part of this video. But the first one, we already talked about it in the topic on values, is the value of the product to the customers. The more important the product is to your customer, the more value it's going to have, and the more for them. So, and therefore, the more money you're going to be able to charge, the more profit you're going to make, the more essential it is to them. Okay? So, for example, when you think about the airline industry, the petrol they use is extremely important. It's a lot of value for them. So it's very important for them. That's gonna determine that you can probably charge more money, because it's essential for an airline, for a plane, to use petrol to take off and fly. But then there is a second factor. It's not only the value of the product, but it's also how many other competitors are selling the same product as you. So in the case of airlines and petrol, how many other companies are actually selling the same product? Why? Because if you're not the only one selling the product, then the one who's buying from you might be able to tell you, listen, your price is too high, I'm gonna go to your competitor. So again, the more competitors you have, the more intense the competition, the less value you are gonna get out of your product. And the third one, which is connected to the second one, is your bargaining power at different stages. So that means how much control you have over the price you charge for your product, like in the airline example. How much power do you have as a petrol provider to charge more? Well, it depends on the competitors. But then as well, we need to look at how much control you have over those who actually sell you the materials you need to produce your product. So when we talk about graphene in that industry, that's important as well. The graphene that you buy, or the graphite that you buy to turn that into graphene, how easy is it for you to negotiate the price? So we go back to the same idea. The more suppliers you have, the more bargaining power you have over them. Because now you can always go to another one. Okay? So these 3 elements are very important. We're going to cover them in depth later on when we talk about industry analysis in more details. Now I just want you to know about them. These 3 are going to determine the difference that you're going to get between what you spent in producing your product, your solution, your innovation, and the money that your customers are willing to pay. These three factors are going to determine that the return on capital, the money that you're going to bring back to your investors. So industry analysis is about this. It's about understanding these three factors, how they work, how they operate, and how you can control them to maximize the value you get out of the industry in question. And to choose the best industry, to choose the industry where these three key factors are to your benefit. So let's look at a few examples just to see how these three basic principles that we have identified in order to analyze the value you can extract out of your product in a given industry. Let's start with this example here. Let's talk about the casing, sausage casing industry. So you have an example here of a company called Devro. And now let's think about it. How profitable you think this industry is? In other ways, what is the value of the product to the customers? What is the value of sausage casing to those companies that produce sausages? Second, what do you think is the intensity of the competition? How many out there actually make casings for sausages? And third, what is the relative bargaining power that they have with their suppliers and with their buyers? Well, you'll be surprised. A lot of people might think that the margins here are very low. That maybe even though the value of the product is important, I mean, casings are important when you're making sausages, but the key thing here is that this industry is extremely profitable because of the second one, the intensity of the competition. So the intensity of the competition is actually quite low. When you look at these numbers, it's pretty amazing. I mean, during 2013 and 2017, this company earned a return on equity of 23%. That means that the money that investors were putting in were getting a 23% back. Also, the key thing here is what we were saying before, is the intensity of the competition. They each have 60% of the overall market. That is a lot. That means that the competition is quite small. And this is great. When you have very few competitors, then you have more bargaining power over sausage producers. Now you can ask for more money because the options are very limited. They don't have many other companies that are going to be able to provide with the same kind of product. So again, these kind of analysis, these 3 points allow you to really see how profitable an industry is. And sometimes you might find it surprising, like in the case of sausage casings. We can go now to the other extreme. Another industry, very different industry, where the profitability is quite low. And that's the airline industry. Let's focus on the America, in the States. In the States alone, there's 150 companies competing. And in a way, I mean, when you think about the elements we have identified here, there is a lack of product differentiation. Like when you think about budget budget airlines, the difference is very low. It's very difficult to make a difference while keeping the prices low. Therefore, the competition is extremely aggressive. In the airline industry, competition is done by pricing, trying to sell cheaper flights. So in here, the profit, the return on capital is quite low. So you have here on the left, you have examples of a few companies and their revenues, their net margins, and the last one is the return on capital. And you can see that United, for example, they had around 3, 1.6, 1.9, 2.2. Compare that with 20 something percent that it was for the casing industry. There is a massive difference. But again, the key element here, or the key idea here is that in order to understand how profitable an industry is, you need to look at those 3 elements we have covered before. You need to be looking at the value of the product to customers, but not only alone, the intensity of the competition and how much power you have over your suppliers, and your customers. So in the case of the airline industry, your control or your power over your customers is very low. Why? Because there's 150 companies offering more or less the same service. And the same thing as well when it comes to your suppliers. Suppliers, sometimes even in the petrol industry, in the oil industry, you don't have a lot of controls. Prices when it comes to petrol can go up quite a lot based on geopolitical reasons, and airlines have very little control about how much money they can pay for the petrol. So all those factors explain these numbers we have here. So they are not an accident. So these are two examples, two extreme examples. But the idea here is that if you carefully consider these three elements, you can have a really good understanding of which industry is the best one for you. So again, at the bottom of this slide, I have the three elements you need to take into account when you are trying to determine the profit you can actually make in an industry, okay? So I'm keeping it here just to make sense of what I'm going to say next. So if you look at them, if you look at the first one, it's about the customers. We were talking about that in topic 2. We're saying the value of your product, of your technology, to the problem that your customers are going to have. What is the problem they have? How your technology, your product is going to resolve that problem. That's going to determine how much money you can make out of your solution. So that's why the first player that you need to take into account are your customers. And we have it here in this box, okay? We actually have it at the bottom, but it's just one of them. The customers are important. Then we talk about the intensity of competition as well. How many others are selling the same product as you? And that's what we have in the box here in the middle. We have your competitors. And then we have the relative bargaining power at different stages of the value chain, meaning who do you need to produce your solution? So not only your bargaining power with your customers, but as well your bargaining power with your suppliers. Who do you need to produce graphene? Who do you need to produce the material that absorbs humidity very well? Who do you need to produce that toxin that that you're going to use for insecticides? So you need to be looking at them. You need to be looking at your suppliers. So from these 3 points, we get the 3 main players we want to understand. Strategy is about understanding these 3 players and understand one thing. You want to understand how much value each of them is going to extract from your product. In other words, you want to understand how much money they are going to be taking from you. Your suppliers, how much money are they going to be taking from you? What you need to buy, the raw material that you need to buy, how expensive it is, how easy is it to access that material. Competitors, how many customers are going to take away from you? Because that's, in a way, it's extracting value from your product. And your customers, how likely or how easy is for them to change to another product that is similar to yours? What is their power over you? So understanding these 3 key players will allow you to understand the profit you can make in that industry. So the idea is that the more power you have over these 3, the more power you have over them, the more value you're going to extract from your product. So the bigger the margin is going to be between the money you have to spend on producing your technology, your solution, your product, and the money you're going to get back, your return on capital. How much money you're going to return on the capital you invest. So that's why this is what the industry environment is about. But this industry environment is not isolated. These suppliers, these competitors, these customers are actually in a bigger environment. And that's why industry analysis as well is not only about looking at the industry, it's as well about looking at the environment. and the different forces and events that actually shape your industry. So the way you do it is you need to be looking at different events, different forces in the industry, and how they affect each of these three key players. So, for example, one group of events, of forces that are going to affect an industry, the national or the international economy. So, for example, I have an example here on the left. In Venezuela, there's a bank there, Santander, and they made a massive loss. Why? Because there was a massive recession in Venezuela. There was a massive, political stability was gone, meaning that was gonna affect your customers, those who are willing to use your banking services. If there is a recession, if the political environment is not safe, they are going to behave differently. So again, you look at this situation, you look at this recession, you look at this political situation in this country, and then you analyze how it affects each of these three players that are key for your profit. Okay? Other things that happen in the environment, new technologies. For example, there is these new refrigerators that they can use in trucks. So the company that produces these new refrigerators or these refrigerators are constantly looking for new technologies. Because new technologies is going to allow you to improve these refrigerators. So again, you need to be thinking, okay, there is a new technology here, bonded metals in this case, that is going to allow me to produce more efficient refrigerators. But what does it mean in terms of my suppliers? How my suppliers are going to change? Because if it's a new technology, I'm going to have to be looking for new suppliers. And the same thing about competitors. What is going to happen to my competitors? If I'm the only one developing this technology, then probably I'll have power over them. And the same thing for my customers. If I offer them better refrigerators for their trucks, I'll be in a better position to charge them more money. So again, something happens in the environment, a new technology, then you think about how it's going to affect each of these three players. Government and politics, for example. Coca-Cola. Coca-Cola depends on aluminium, the production of aluminium. It's essential for them to produce a can of Coke, you need aluminium. It's a very important product for them. So every time there are sanctions against Russia, Russia is a major producer of aluminium, then that's gonna affect your suppliers, your Russian suppliers. So then that's gonna affect the price of your can of Coke. Excuse me. And that's gonna affect as well how much, benefit or how much value you are gonna get every time you sell a can of Coke. The same thing about the natural environment. Now we have global warming. How is that gonna affect your suppliers, your customers, your competitors? Demographic structure. The fact that with time, there's more and more people living in big cities. Do we have access to food, to fresh food? How easy or difficult is it to get access to fresh herbs, for example? And you have here a company that I did a bit of work as well with, and they were working on this idea of aeroponics. And the idea is about using artificial intelligence to grow herbs and vegetables indoors. Using, with artificial intelligence would actually optimize temperature, the amount of water they need. You could actually grow in different layers. And in a way, what you would do with that is to have the produce closer to the supermarket. Now you don't have to buy from a farm in a foreign country. You don't have to bring it to actually pay for transport. So all those demographic changes open opportunities. Now you can be the supplier. You can become a supplier. Okay? So now the supplier in that industry changes. Okay? Our social forces are very important. Free trade coffee. Back in the early 90s, people became more conscious about coffee and how ethical that coffee was being sourced. So you want to drink coffee, but you want to drink coffee ethically. That's becoming more important. So again, if you're somebody who's selling coffee, how is that going to affect your relationship with your suppliers? Well, it's going to change it a lot, because now you want to make sure that those who supply with coffee beans are not or are paying a proper salary to those who actually grow the coffee beans. So again, these are just a few examples of how different environmental factors can affect how much money you can make in an industry. But the best way of approaching this is by thinking this event, this change in the environment, this force in the environment, how is it going to affect each of these three players? How this change is going to affect the suppliers, the competitors, and the customers. We'll be talking more about this in the next video, in the second part of industry analysis. We'll be going more into detail about this.